And the idea is to bring you science speakers for all ages, for all sorts of topics: bio-inspired design, planetary science, regenerative innovation, and environmental conservation, just to name a few. And today I'm pleased to present our first speaker. Dr. Tasmin Woolley-Barker is an evolutionary biologist with an extensive background in leadership, innovation, and sustainability. She's also a pioneer in the emerging discipline of biomimicry, working with global clientele to provide bio-inspired solutions to all kinds of problems. How does the rest of nature do things? The answers are surprising and often transformative. She teaches at Arizona State University's Biomimicry Center and is a regular contributor to AskingNature, the Biomimicry Institute's blog. Her column, the Biomimicry Manual, which I highly recommend everybody Google and read immediately after you leave this room, appears on Inhabitat, a digital magazine with over 3 million followers. And her book, Teeming, How Superorganisms Work to Build Infinite Wealth in a Finite World, is coming out in May of 2017, and I'm very excited about reading it. May I present to you Dr. Tasmin Woolley-Barker.
Thank you. I am so excited that so many people showed up. You just never know. Do we have kids here? Any kids? Okay, well, not so many, so you guys are going to have to pretend to be children, because this requires child participation. So what I need you to do is, if you see an animal or some hint of an animal, I need you to call out what you think it is. Make a guess. Okay. So it's going to be a challenge. What do you got? Yay! If I was a child teacher, I'd have like candies for you. Sea anemones, good. What else you got? Is it urchin? Is it an urchin? Sea urchin? Yeah, we got sea urchins.
Sea pickle?
Yeah. Sea pickle. Cucumber. There are sea pickles after happy hour. Okay. So anyway, we'll have a few of these throughout, and you can kind of just, hey, I think that's a blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I was asked to come and talk about science and connection. Oh, you guys missed the memo. You guys get to call out the animals. If you see any animals up here, you can guess what they are. Just shout it out, okay? Because I need a little help. Sometimes I forget what they are. So I was asked to come talk about science and connection. And, my own career is this crazy quilt of connections between, I studied primates, I studied baboons, and I studied ant societies, and I study the evolution of all kinds of species. I help companies implement those into innovations in their own work. So it's a very vastly connective kind of thing that we do. And so, when I'm thinking about science, what is it? What is science really? And it's observing the little details in the world, in the natural world, and building them into bigger patterns and trying to make sense of the world. And, when we do that, sometimes it's a game changer, and sometimes it changes the entire way that we view everything that we do, and it matters. And so that's kind of the armchair journey that I want to take you on today, to see how this goes. So that whole idea of connection made me think, first off, of this John Steinbeck quote, and I just think it's really beautiful, and it's, all things are one thing, and that one thing is all things. Plankton, a shimmering phosphorescence on the sea, and the spinning planets and an expanding universe, all bound together by the elastic string of time. Look from the tide pool to the stars and back to the tide pool again. So that is the armchair journey that I'm going to take you on today, from the tide pools out to the stars and back again, and we'll see how everything ties together. That's my hope. So that's a big statement. And the way, what he's really getting at, what Steinbeck's really getting at, is this idea of looking at the details and building them into the patterns. So to do that, we have to really look closely. And we're going to start the journey in the tide pools, looking at the details. Oh, did somebody call out what it is?
I did.
Crab. That's an easy one. That was an easy one. That's a giveaway. Okay. So great minds, of course, have always done that. And Darwin was one of them, of course. And just to give you an idea of how science can change our lives, this is a guy who, he just really looked closely at what he saw. And, he saw all the finches on the islands in the Galapagos, and he saw their beaks were different sizes, and he started noticing they were on different islands, and he started thinking, that's interesting. And then he found some fossils of this glyptodont, which is a creature that doesn't exist anymore, almost like a giant armadillo. And he started thinking, well, that's strange. Creatures that used to be around aren't around anymore. So creatures change. And then he realized, that the Earth is very, very old. He could see these layers in the Earth and realized that the Earth is very old. And those three details put together in his mind suddenly clicked for him into evolution, into natural selection. And that's really changed everything, that we think about life. And all these scientific parables or paradigms are like that. And, the flat Earth. You wouldn't sail off the end of that if you didn't know better. Similar kind of thing. So my point is that looking at the little details, science, has the power to really change our lives in very big ways. And so what I want to talk to you about today is one of those really big paradigm shifts that I think is going on today. And it is something that comes from looking at small details and building into these bigger patterns. And I find it to be just super exciting and hopeful. And I hope that you'll feel that when you leave today. So I could start this story pretty much anywhere, but I'm going to stick with the Steinbeck theme and start it in the tide pools because that's a nice place to look and it's nearby here. So a lot of people don't know. Oh, what?
Sea anemone.
Sea anemone. Good. Okay. They're going to get harder.
Sea stars.
Sea stars. Yeah, I know. I say starfish too.
This little girl back here corrected us.
Did
earlier.
you?
She said sea star.
Way to
right.
go. You are right. You are correct. That's great. Okay. So a lot of people don't know that John Steinbeck was actually a biologist, even though, also a writer. But his very best friend was really possibly the most important marine biologist of our time. And that was Ed Ricketts. And before Ricketts and Steinbeck did this work in the tide pools, people were really stuck in this kind of Victorian model of, collecting specimens of beetles and pinning them on a board and collecting and naming them. But these two guys were the first guys to really start looking at ecologies and connection. And they wanted to know, how are these animals connected? And that was really new. And they really were the first marine ecologists. And so it's pretty cool that, we just don't know that about Steinbeck. And he was going up and down this coast. All this area he knew very well. And what he and Ricketts did, that's them, they had this little boat, and they went all the way down all the way down the coast to the Sea of Cortez, around the Cape. And everywhere they went, they'd stop and look at the tide pools. And all the little kids would come out, and they're deep in Mexico. And the kids would come out, and they'd never seen scientists. They didn't know, a grown man looking in the tide pools, what are you guys doing? And they'd say, well, what'd you lose? And Steinbeck was like, oh, nothing. And they'd say, well, what are you looking for? And so he kept thinking about that. Well, what are we looking for? And, of course, being a philosophical writer kind of guy, he had to write a bunch of books about that, basically. But that's really what I hope you come out of this today, kind of wondering, what is it that we're looking for when we're looking at these details. That is a snowstorm. And so starting with the tide pools, it's a really difficult place to live, one of the hardest places to live. And I don't know, maybe these kids know a reason why it might be so hard? Can you take any guesses why it's hard to live there? You can look what are they doing? What about those seals? They're getting smashed by waves, right? It's hard. The waves are trying to smash them off the waves. And then you see the starfish and the anemones are drying out. And so the problem with living in the tide pools is there's so much change because you've got the tides coming in twice a day. So you're always flooded or you're baked in the sun. You've got UV coming down on you. You've got the smashed by waves, you're getting washed off the rocks. Death from above, seagulls, it's tough. So they have a lot of challenges that they face in the tide pools. And what you realize is that we face a lot of those challenges too. And so we're going to look at how the creatures there solve those problems and compare it to how we do it. And that's pretty much how we do it. Yeah. Let's see. So what do we do? Okay, if we're getting smashed by high impact forces, if waves are, let's just say we had to invent a robot that lived in the tide pools so we could go on our armchair adventure. How would we do it? Well, first of all, we'd probably mine for a bunch of metals, and then we'd subject them to really high heat and turn them into ceramics and alloys that would protect us from the waves. And then we'd have to make sure they're flood proof. And then we'd have to make sure that they don't dry out or get hit by, destroyed by UV light. And then you have the problem of anchoring them to the rocks, right? You'd have to, you can't, we don't have a glue that works in water. And then you certainly couldn't move around. So it would be a really big problem. And then flooding, this is my neighborhood last January. And people were getting around on paddle boards. So our flood walls don't work that great either. We just don't have that great of solutions. But these creatures are facing this twice a day, all the time. And the solutions they have are very different than our own. So I'm going to go into this a little bit. Okay, guess. Abalone. And this is one of just a miraculous substance. It is, pearls are made from that. But if you were to look at through a scanning electron microscope, you would see that these are actually made of chalk that's just crumbly. And they're little hexagonal plates and almost like a 3D printer. And in between are these layers of kind of a elastic material. So it's a little bit flexible, but it's very, very hard. And we don't have a substance like this. We have ceramics that are just as strong, but they're 300 times denser. So these are far more efficient. And not only that, but our ceramics, we have to heat in a kiln. We have to mine for them. These guys are doing it in seawater at ambient temperature, and they assemble themselves. They don't have an engineer. They don't have an R&D team. And it's pretty mind-blowing. What's that?
Urchin.
Good. And so, and again, here, these sea urchins are getting hit by waves, and they've basically, these are like shock absorbers. So when they're rolled by waves, they kind of bounce along, and they can wedge into holes. But the whole thing has this incredible micro arrangement that car companies are emulating, and it's really amazing when you start looking at the very small level. Another sea urchin, and you can see these tips are designed to break off in certain places that won't harm it. And so, like, I worked with an automotive company recently, and they used this inspiration to pre-score areas that are going to break, that are safer. So these ideas are there. They really are using in these companies. Barnacles. And these guys, so you can see they've got these they have the problem of when the tide goes out, they can't breathe in the air. So they have to seal really tight and keep that water, that moisture. So they do it with these 4 little doors, shut tight. But if you look under the scanning electron microscope, those edges are actually made of like a plastic that's really soft and tight, like almost like a squeegee on your windshield wipers. And it fits perfectly, and it's super, super intricate, and they fit together perfectly, like something way beyond what we could design. And it's really quite remarkable. Any takers?
Sea slug.
Yeah, sea cucumber, sea cucumber, sea pickle. What I love about this guy is, so, have you ever picked one up?
Yeah.
They're like soft, right?
Yeah.
But and they do that so they can squish into rocks and things like that. But if they're attacked, they suddenly turn rigid. And the way they do it is they have these little whiskers inside their skin, and an enzyme that they produce immediately turns those whiskers, changes the orientation, and makes it into this hard web net under their skin. So it's like a Kevlar vest that goes soft or firm whenever they need it. And there are companies who are making this for, bulletproof vests and also for medical implants, so that you could put them in when they're hard, and then when they're exposed to water, they soften. And so you don't get all the inflammation. And it's pretty cool. I mean, these things are just, nobody designed them. They just, it's just that magnitude of time that has shaped this. And the last one I wanted to do was the kelp. Just a beautiful, resilient design. That they use these air bladders to stay near the surface so they can photosynthesize, and they don't accumulate any debris on their surface. How do they do these things? It's all very, very interesting. And okay, but you can't guess. A caterpillar foot? No. How about this?
Sea anemone?
No.
It's a sea star.
Yeah, the tube feet on the sea star. It looks like an elephant foot. Yeah. So these guys are crazy what they're doing, but one of the neat things is, they when the tide goes out are exposed to this heat, extreme heat, and so what they do is when the tide is in, they collect cold water and pump it into their interior, almost like a little refrigerator. And so it keeps their bodies cool when they're exposed. So the little tricks are so simple, really, and low energy, and benign, just easy. And compared to what we do, it's really humbling. It's very humbling. And compared to our own materials, here you've got this spider silk. And it's 5 times stronger than our steel per weight. So if we could make our steel that light, they're 5 times more efficient. And the reason is because they build with shape instead of just heating it and blasting it. And so these are solutions that have already been solved. And all we need to do is tap into them. And really it comes back to Darwin and these, science. Just paying attention, looking, observing, and building these into patterns. And the paradigm shift here is that these things are starting to become into reach for us, where we could really start to examine the way we make and do everything. Because we really are starting to approach the ability to emulate some of these technologies. I promised we'd zoom out to the stars. And the reason that these things are so brilliant, really, in the way they do things is because of the time that's involved in this. We think we're so clever, But if you think about it, if the age of the Earth were a calendar year, and today was a breath before midnight on New Year's Eve, humans, we showed up a scant 15 minutes ago, and all of recorded history has blinked by in the last 60 seconds. That's how young we are. That's all of these inventions that we're so proud of are just the blink of an eye compared to all this time, these 3.8 billion years that life has had to invent these solutions. And there we are midnight, December 31, New Year's Eve. It's an antelope party. Maybe we'll have some pickled sea pickles. But just to give you an idea of the magnitude of this, if you were to compress all life into one calendar year, this is the first life, unicellular life. It didn't even appear till March. Actually, I think unicellular is February, but this is multicellular life. Didn't even appear till March. And so lucky for us, our planet mates, the fantastic meshwork of plants, animals, and microbes, have been patiently perfecting their wares since March. That's an incredible 3.8 billion years since the first bacteria. So the amount of time these things have had to invent these solutions really boggles the mind. And even if you keep going on that calendar year, you get to November, you still have only reached fungus. Only fungus. Fungus is my favorite. You've got fish and plants and insects, but not too much in the way of brains there. And it's already November. December's more interesting. We got dinosaurs, we have birds, we have some little mammals. But really, it's not till midnight that we get humans. And here we are, we think we're the pinnacle of everything, but all of these solutions exist. And so for me, when I think about sustainability, I really think about something like the shark, which has basically been unchanged for 400 million years. I mean, that's sustainability. That way of life works. And, the failures are fossils. And what surrounds us is a secret to survival. And if you think, 99.9% of all the species that have ever existed on Earth are extinct today. So whatever you see when you're on the trail, whatever species you see, those are survivors. And all of them are geniuses, really, at what they do. They are really honed to do what they do at an incredible degree of perfection. And it's really inspiring to me, when I'm feeling down post-election, I go for a hike and I'm like, wow, you made it, we're going to be okay. Yeah. And the octopus is another one, and I love this, but the ancient Hawaiians think of the octopus as the last survivor of a previous universe, which I love that idea, the alien eyes, and I mean, maybe it's true, these things are bizarre, but it goes back to this sustainability idea of here's what really, really works, because these things evolved 400, 500 million years ago, and they're still doing this quite successfully. And the reason that these species have been so successful, I think, Darwin, as always, nails it, is that they are responsive to change. And I think this is the paradigm shift that we're seeing now. By looking at these species and the length of time that they've had and the sustainability that they achieve, this is within reach for us if we change our paradigm. And I personally, I find a lot of hope in this. And there's our ancient guy from a previous universe. And I think of him as a mentor. It's going to tell us how we can do this. So I'm going to try and show you a little movie.
life's been on Earth for 3.8 billion years. And in that time, life has learned what works and what's appropriate here and what lasts here. And the idea is that perhaps we should be looking at these mentors, at these biological elders. They have figured out how to create a sustainable world. So rather than inventing it from scratch, why don't we take our cues from them? These are Earth-savvy adaptations. They're the consummate life. These organisms are the consummate engineers. They're the consummate chemists and technologists. They've learned how to do it in context. So that's the core idea behind biomimicry, is that the best ideas might not be ours. They might already have been invented. Biomimicry is innovation inspired by nature. It's a new discipline in which the people that make our world, the chemists and architects and material scientists and product designers, they ask themselves, what in the natural world has already solved what it is I'm trying to solve? And then they try to emulate what they've learned. Our work as a species is to create designs and strategies that move us towards being better adapted to life on Earth over the long haul. And when you ask how to be better adapted to this planet, there are no better models than the species that have preceded us for billions of years. You know, there are 30 to 100 million species, maybe more. And in all that diversity, there is a hidden unity. There are a set of operating instructions, how to be an Earthling. And they're life's principles like life runs on sunlight. Except for a few organisms in sulfur vents at the bottom of the ocean, life runs on current sunlight. We run on ancient photosynthesis, trapped in fossil fuels. Life does its chemistry in water as the universal solvent, and we tend to use very, very toxic solvents, like sulfuric acid. Life depends on local expertise. Organisms have to understand their places. They have to know the limits and the opportunities of their places. And life banks on diversity and rewards cooperation. Life wastes nothing, upcycles everything, and most of all, does not foul its nest, does not foul its home. We're a very young species, and probably our best stance as a young species is to be apprentices to these masters. We need to replace our old industrial chemistry book with nature's recipe book. Our synthetic chemistry is completely different than nature's chemistry. We use every element in the periodic table, even the toxic ones. And then we use brute force reactions to get elements to bond or break apart. Life uses a small subset of the periodic table, the safe elements, and then very, very elegant recipes. Low temperature, low pressures, low toxicity. That's nature's chemistry. It's a very different paradigm. And we have to ask ourselves, not just how to replace individual molecules for different kinds of molecules, but rather whole families of reactions. It's a big job to do that, but it's an Apollo project worth pursuing.
That's Janine Benyus, who wrote the original book, Biomimicry, back in '97. And she inspired me to do what I do, and I work for her today. She's just amazing. If you ever get a chance to hear her speak, highly recommend it. Now, I work with a lot of different companies that are actually trying to implement these things, and it's increasingly, I've been doing this maybe since 2008, and I've really seen in that time a huge shift, mind shift in these companies. And a lot of the companies I'm working with are not what you would consider traditional green companies at all. I mean, like Boeing and Dassault, like NASA, automotive companies, guys that are really, they're looking at the bottom line. You know, they're not tree huggings. And but what they're finding is the efficiency. I mean, something like this. Look at that. If you could design a plane to do this, wouldn't you want to? You know. And so I've got guys coming to me, and they actually want to know. And it's really exciting. I'm really, in the past year to 6 months, I'm seeing a real paradigm shift, and it's really hopeful to me. I see a real change. I had NASA came recently, and of course, you know, they're really interested in how do we make Earth-like conditions in these suits and in these terrariums, and you know, and where they're going to live, and how are we survive in space, and there's models for this on Earth, and I think it's really exciting. They actually just put out a white paper on this, and what's interesting to me is I sometimes work in the high schools, and all the high school kids want to work for SpaceX, and they're super excited about this, but they say, what about biomimicry in NASA? What about biomimicry in space? So I'm seeing this as, you know, a moon project, an Apollo project. I think Janine is right. It's very exciting. And just to give you another idea, you know, this this is this OptiStruct software is amazing. They've looked at bird bones, which of course are so light and strong. I mean, they're perfectly engineered for maximum strength and light. And then now we're applying them to buildings and to fashion, and it's just quite incredible what nature has to teach us. And here, so I'm going to give you 3 examples of companies that are actually applying these processes, and in ways that I think are actually changing the world. So you can really see that this is really happening. So this is a friend of mine, Jay Harmon, and he's an Australian. He's a forest ranger, actually, originally. And he spent all his time at the beach surfing and playing on the beach. But he noticed that all energy at the beach seemed to go in spirals. So he saw waves moving in spirals. He saw seashells moving in spirals. And he thought, you know, energy does not move in a straight line like the way we think it does. It's always spiraling. And that, you know, is not conventional wisdom, and that isn't the way that engineers work. But what he actually did was take a whirlpool and he froze it, and then cast an impeller, like a propeller, from that, and found that it's 85% more efficient than the ones we use now. Simply by observing nature and trying to copy it. I think that's very exciting, and now a lot of municipalities in California are switching to this technology. And that's his company, PAX. And now, this is a great story. This guy, Dr. Frank Fish, he's an engineer, and he visited the Scripps Aquarium down in San Diego. And typical engineer, you know, he's in the gift shop, and he saw a little sculpture of a whale, humpback whale, and he thought, this guy got it wrong. That's not the whale. That's not how it works, because these bumps are on the front of the flipper. That's not aerodynamically correct. So he went up to the gift store guy, and he's like, hey, your sculptures are wrong. And the guy's like, well, I don't know, Wayland designed these. Like, I'm pretty sure the guy knows what a whale looks like, you know. And so he thought, well, so he went back home and started looking at it. And he's actually a wind turbine designer, this Frank Fish. Kind of ironic, that's his name. And so he put these flippers on his wave turbines, his wind turbines, and got a 40% reduction in increase in efficiency. And so it turns out that these bombs, these tubercles, are breaking up the turbulence. And you know, these things that you would only learn by observing, and instead of making assumptions about the way nature works. And then this last one, this is Pure Bond. And if you go to Home Depot and buy plywood now, you're buying this Pure Bond. And so this is a guy, Dr. Lee, and he was a chemist for Columbia Forest Products, making plywood, all of it with formaldehyde, super toxic. But he liked to walk on the beach in Oregon, and he's noticed all the mussels sticking to the rocks, and he's tried to pull some off. You can't get them off. And he's like, what are they doing? So he checked it out, and it turns out there's a protein that they're using that is just incredibly strong binding in water, which we don't really have a glue that binds in water, which you can imagine how useful that is for biomedical applications in the body, things like that. So he was able to mimic this protein, and now Columbia Forest Products, all their plywood has been switched to this process. And it's completely non-toxic, no formaldehyde, and all of Home Depot, they only sell this. So it's just a beautiful example of observing and doing something that really made the world a better place. And I really like this example. My point is, look, just really take the time to look. And I think we really are on the edge of a paradigm shift. And it's such a simple, joyful paradigm, because all it is just looking around your world and thinking, how are other species doing it, and how could I do things better? I think it's very exciting. And if you look, if you like to look at spiders, then, which I know you do, they have a lot more eyes. And to give you some even bigger goals, how we can really, when you start thinking this way, you think about, well, why can't we change the way we do everything? Let's really think big. So how do plants make what they make? They make it from the sun. They make it from carbon dioxide. Why can't we do that? Really no reason why not. And we are starting to go that way with photovoltaics, and we are imitating their dye processes in thin film. We're actually approaching their efficiency, and I think we can even make it more efficient. But it's just, we can really start to make things the way nature makes things. And it is a game changer. Or what about the coral reefs? Here it's basically cement that they're making. It's made with calcium carbonate. It's made from dissolved carbon in the water. Why can't we do that? There's really no reason why not. And this company, Calera, is actually doing that. And so what they're doing is taking atmospheric carbon and turning it into cement. And so if you think about that, I don't know where we can find carbon dioxide. Maybe, I don't know, Beijing. But you start to think like that, and you're like, well, we could change the whole way we build, and we imagine everything we build being good for the planet, and bringing back all that carbon to the biosphere, making things. It's really exciting, and it also, I don't know about you, but sometimes you wake up and you're like, this is hopeless. We're circling a drain here, but I really think it can change on a dime, and I think this is a big part of the answer. This is a new one, another one. So carbon negative manufacture, being able to manufacture with carbon from the air. And this is called New Light Technologies. They're making this thing called air carbon. And they're actually making plastic out of carbon in the air. And Dell is using it, and Sprint is using it for all their iPhone cases. So if you can imagine every iPhone case being made of carbon from the atmosphere, you can start to see this scale up, and you can start to see things change on a dime. I really think so. And you could start to see whole cities being made the way that nature makes them, and making more life with our life. Imagine consumption being good for the planet. It really changes your whole mindset. And I think it's really exciting. You know, and I like being able to tell my children this because they get very upset sometimes, pollution and loss of biodiversity, and they get very hopeless. And I'm like, no, just looking at it wrong. So I do find a lot of hope in that. I just wanted to wrap up that I actually wrote the book that I just wrote is on this whole topic, but specifically on societies and that are sustainable. And so here, these are termite mounds. Who's on fire?
Okay.
But see, these termite mounds, these are their air conditioners. They don't live in these. They live way below. That's simply an air conditioner. But the way they do it, and there's architects that are mimicking this. But you can imagine whole cities that use these things. And what if you could make our cities have the same kind of performance standards that the wild Kalahari had, or whatever ecosystem it is, you know? Just because they're buildings doesn't mean we can't be performing the same ecosystem services that were there before. And then here's these termite mounds again. And what's super exciting to me is that these societies, for termites, they've been around 250,000 years. They're no different than we are. They make air-conditioned houses and do the things that we do. Live in cities, tens of millions strong, and they don't know each other. They're they don't ride the subway together, but they probably don't all like each other, you know. But what happens is, so they go out at night and they collect these little scraps. Everybody collects little scraps of grass and twigs and bring it back into their mound. And they have these fungal gardens in there. And they feed these scraps to their gardens, and the fungus digests it and feed the larvae. So it's a symbiotic relationship that takes these nutrients that are hard to digest and puts them in a nutrient easily accessible format. And in the process, it enriches all the grass around these mounds. So the grass around the mound is tender, no thorns, richer, more nutrients. And what does that do? It draws all kinds of grazing animals. So you get all kinds of antelopes and other creatures coming. And what does that draw? Carnivores. And so you get carcasses and you're getting droppings, and the soil just gets richer and richer. So it's this regenerative cycle. And these societies that are not so different than us, they rely on them. And for 250 million years, I mean, it works. And there's really no reason why we can't do this. So when we think, well, humans are just overpopulating and we're just not a sustainable species, in my mind, I don't think that's true. I think we just have a very big paradigm shift that can really switch on a dime once we integrate some of these lessons. And my last one is the ultimate networked society, which are these fungus underground. This is their little network, and it looks so much like our own internet webs. But actually, they're made up of individuals, genetically distinct individuals, just like us, reaching out and connecting and shuttling nutrients and water among themselves. And what do they do with it? They trade it with the trees for sugar, and they support the entire forest, which supports the entire ecosystem. They're basically farmers for this entire ecosystem. And I really see us converging on something like that, and I think that this is something we can aspire to, is to support real ecosystems with our way of life. And I see it turning on a dime. It can turn very quickly. And I think that's true. Just my shameless promotion, there's the book.
Yay!
So it comes out in May. I hope you get it. But I made a little infographic summary of it, and you're welcome to purchase one if you want. And what I have, if you purchase one, you're going to get a 50% discount on the book. So you'll get butt. So you just email me. If I give you give me your email, you'll get a half discount on the butt.